Well, now that President Biden has taken office, he faces the reality of governing in the middle of a pandemic with narrow majorities in Congress and a lengthy list of policy goals.
We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes.
All right, joining me now is Anthony Scaramucci, founder and chairman of Skybridge Capital and Trump's former White House communications director. Anthony, thanks for giving us your time today. So you just heard that quote from Biden's inaugural speech yesterday. He talked a lot about unity. How difficult might that be in this current environment? I mean, we saw just a couple of weeks ago the staunch Trump supporters and how they feel about our democracy when they ransacked the Capitol. How difficult is it going to be for Joe Biden to be able to attain unity in this country over the next 4 years?
Well, listen, I think it will be difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. I thought the speech was very good. If you read the transcript, it was well delivered, but the transcript, the words themselves were absolutely beautiful. And I think he's on the right track. But I have this opinion, it may be right or wrong, that economic aspiration solves the ills of anger and the potentiality of violence. And so that's true in other countries, not just the United States. If people feel like their family's doing better and their children are going to do better than they are, they dial down the acrimony. And so, one of the things that President Trump did in the last several weeks of his term was incite a lot of different things. And that's the reason why he was impeached again. If President Biden can come up with the right economic plan and economic policies to create more aspiration for lower and middle income people, I think this thing will abate itself faster than others think.
Do you think that he's going to get cooperation from Congress, where now in the Senate, the Dems have a very thin margin of error there? Is he going to get the support he needs for this $1.9 trillion stimulus package? Or might they work with him, but not too much, because maybe the Republicans want to take the White House back in the next 4 years?
Yes, and of course, they're not only the White House, they're playing for the congressional midterms. They obviously want to see if they can take back the House. And so obviously, the Senate's in more or less a tie, but you get the point. And so, yeah, there'll be some resistance, but I don't think, again, this could be contrarian. I think what's happened here after watching the Capitol stormed, an insurrection, the potential violence on elected leaders, calling for the death of Vice President Pence and Speaker Pelosi, I think what's happening here now is people are like, whoa, this has gotten a little bit out of hand. It's a little bit too far. Let's see if we can put some things together that can put the country at ease and transition us into a different environment that's more cooperative. And I think that's in the best interest of both parties. So if you're a Republican strategist, you're saying to yourself, okay, we got to do that because it'll help us win the midterms. And if you're a Democratic strategist, you're saying the same thing. We got to do that so that we can expand our majority. So the good news is I think both parties recognize that that's probably the best choice for them in terms of where the incentives lie.
If you were advising President Biden right now on what he should be focusing on in the first 100 days, I mean, he has said that it is the pandemic. In fact, we're waiting for him to make some comments on his plan right now. But what would you advise him as it pertains to the economy?
I would go for the biggest possible stimulus. If you read any of my writings last March, I said this is a catastrophe for middle and lower middle income people. This is a war. I just want people to think about it this way. Imagine if a sovereign government invaded the United States last March. They killed 400,000 of our fellow citizens, on its way to 500,000, and hundreds of thousands of people, if not now millions, were being wounded by this sovereign governmental army. Imagine the governmental response to the United States, our civic leaders, our state and local governments. And so even though it's an invisible organism that's killing our fellow citizens and impairing us, We have to think of it like that. And when you put it in that context, a $1, $2, or $3 trillion stimulus to help our fellow citizens right now is absolutely necessary. Think of it as a war. Get together, drop the partisan rancor, and do what's right for America right now. And that would be my message to them, to President Biden. And I think he knows that. We just got to convince the other people around him.
What would you tell him with regards to taxes? We know that he wants to raise taxes, roll back the tax cuts during the Trump administration, raise the corporate tax. And so many analysts we've talked to say that's going to stymie the stock market rally in 2021 if that indeed does happen. What would you tell him on the tax front?
Well, I would say that you've got headwinds, and you've got the pandemic plus economic desecration through the country. Go back to 2008 and 9. You were part of the Obama administration. You couldn't get taxes raised until the economy healed. But I would also respect the idea that moving from 21 to 28 or to back up to 39.6, given the massive amount of deficit spending that we're doing, I would respect at some point that will be likely, whether people listening to us right now like it or not. But now is not the time to do that, and any more than it was the time to do that in the 2009, 10, early part of 11 time period while we were digging ourselves out of the global financial crisis.
So you think raising taxes does make sense, especially given the fact that we've really dug ourselves in quite the debt hole with all the money that we need to spend during this pandemic?
Well, remember, if you're not going to raise taxes, deficit spending is unfunded tax liability. So someone's going to ultimately pay it. If you want to push it off to our children and grandchildren, we can do that. I don't think that's necessarily responsible. The flip side is if you never want to pay it off, you could do that as well. You could just monetize the debt. But we know from sociology, when you're monetizing the debt, it weakens the living standards for lower and middle income people because they're mostly getting their money in wages. When you devalue money, if you own assets, the assets go up in price, but wages usually don't. So I'm more in the camp today as an older person of deficits don't matter, but I do recognize they matter somewhat. I would encourage people to read Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth. She's a modern monetary theorist, writing a very compelling book about the need for deficit spending right now, but also recognizing that at some point you don't want to overdo things. And so we just have to find that inflection point. But now is not the time to raise taxes any more than it was with the first part of the Obama administration.
All right, you're not an older person, by the way. You're still a youngin' there, Anthony.
All right. Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of Botox and hair dye. Okay, I've Joan Riverized a little bit. You know what I mean? I think I look pretty good for 105.
You are preserving very, very well. All right. I want to talk a little bit about your former boss, Donald Trump, who did not attend that inauguration yesterday. The first time that's happened where an outgoing president has not gone to the inauguration of the incoming president in more than 150 years. So I just want to run a soundbite from what he said yesterday in his last public appearance as president, and then get your reaction.
The things that we've done have been just incredible, and I couldn't have done it without you. So just a goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form. So have a good life. We will see you soon.
So, Anthony, you know Donald Trump personally. Hearing that, what form might we see him come back in?
Well, I know him well enough to know that the body language was horrific all day yesterday. That was a defeated person for sure. He's saying have a good life. He's never acknowledged that 400,000 people died under his watch and as a result of his malpractice and malfeasance and the 33,000 plus lies that he told while he was president of the United States. So when he says he's coming back in a form, I guess he means he's going to be a political power going forward. I personally would like to get out of politics and back to business. But if Mr. Trump thinks he's going to be a political power going forward, then we're going to continue to hit him as hard as you can hit him from a metaphorical perspective in politics, because white ethnocentric nationalism and the dividing of the country through anger-based politics and tribalism is not the answer for the United States in 2021 or beyond. The answer for the United States is unity. America first is a bunch of nonsense. We need to think of ourselves as Americans first, or first we are Americans, and we've got to unify the country. And so President Trump's message is off key. It's not the right message for us. It's not the right message for America's reflection upon the world. And so if he thinks he's coming back, my bet is he won't be able to. You will remember last year, you and I were in Davos together. The entire elites in Davos said he was winning re-election. You can find the tape where I said to you, there's no way he's winning re-election. He's going to lose because of his personality. And I'll say very declaratively today that there's no chance he'll be the 2024 nominee for president of the Republican Party. And we will work tirelessly to make sure that that happens.
You were right. We were in Davos, and of course, it seems like a lifetime ago, and it was only a year ago, and so much in our world has changed. But Anthony, as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as Trump goes back to civilian life, what happens to his companies? What happens to his businesses? We've already heard that the city of New York wants to start to sever ties. Buildings are taking his name off of them. You know, how is he going to be able to survive as a business person?
Well, listen, he's a resourceful person. So people that are going to report on his demise as a business person should go back to the early 90s when he had a series of bankruptcies that he survived and ended up flourishing after those bankruptcies. I think he's done a lot of favors for people. Remember, he's curried favor with autocrats and dictators around the world for the last 4 years. He unclipped his executive order related to lobbying the government. And so he's going to be looking for favors from all those people that he put into powerful positions. And so I wouldn't write him off necessarily. I do think that he has assets in his favor, and that would be my recommendation to him. If his business is weak now as a result of the pandemic or his destruction of his personal brand and his business's brand, focus on the business, get out of politics, and try to revitalize it.
All right, so if he gets out of politics, and we don't know if that's really going to be the case, what about other Trumps, Don Jr., Ivanka? Can you see them having a future in politics? Might one of them become the face of the GOP?
Well, listen, I've made it a matter of policy not to talk about the family because, when President Trump attacked my wife on Twitter, on his presidential Twitter feed in August of 2019, I just made a decision. I'm not going to really talk about them. I wish them well. I always got along with them, whether it was Jared, Ivanka, Eric, or Don Jr. One of them, I'm not going to mention who, said to me a long time ago, I don't really want to be fighting with you. Your fight is with my father, and I don't really like the idea that my father's fighting with you. You raised him $1 million, hundreds of hours of media advocacy. I'm sorry, I gave him $1 million, raised him tens of millions of dollars. But, listen, he's hurt them from a political perspective, but I like them, and I would prefer not to overly comment about them.
All right, fair enough. But when you look at the Republican Party right now, a very divided party, where does it go from here? Who is it going to look to for leadership? What happens with Mike Pence, who we saw in the final weeks of the presidency distanced himself more and more from President Trump, whom he was very close with?
Well, but that happens. Remember General Kelly, who I've become personal friends with now. General Kelly fired me from the White House. We're good friends now. That's the strange bedfellows of politics. He would tell you that all relationships end badly with Donald Trump. So it's no surprise to me that even how loyal and supplicant almost to President Trump, Vice President Pence was, that they would be in this situation at the end, because obviously he couldn't do what President Trump was asking him. So I think the vice president may run for president. He'll have standing. He's a credible guy. There are 10 people in that party that see themselves as president or a future president. And what I would say to all of them is there's a tremendous vacuum of leadership. Don't fall back on Trumpism. There's a venality to it. There's almost a evil malevolence to it. Inspire people, look to the future and grow the party, and think about the wonderful, colorful mosaic of the American people, and see if we can expand the tent of the party to reflect more of what the American people are, both demographically and culturally. And you don't have that right now. You've got a lot of standard, cynical politicians in the mix, but you never know. Maybe somebody will come around and sort of restate those principles and have an audacious vision for the future that can knit that party back together. I certainly would love to see that.
Before we let you go, the number one thing you think President Biden could do, should do to help corporate America through this pandemic?
Well, learn something from President Trump. I would say to President Biden, let's not focus on left or right policy or currying favor with special interest groups right now. Let's focus on what's right or wrong for America. And one thing that President Trump got right was a lighter touch on regulation. Have more trust in the business community. That will help these companies grow. It'll give them confidence to invest and deploy capital as we come out of the pandemic. Don't be cautious on raising taxes. Let's create more jobs. Let's get the wheel moving in the system. Don't overregulate. Don't virtue signal in a way that's going to be damaging to jobs creation. That would be my message.
All right. And we are going to leave it there. Anthony Scaramucci of Skybridge Capital. Always good to chat with you. Be well.
It's a lot of fun for me. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.